Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are going to explore the baffling 2014 disappearance of Tammy Kingery, a case defined by a single cryptic note and, wow, a locked door.
It really is a profound paradox. It just grabs you immediately, doesn't it? Because the whole thing happens in, the most secure place imaginable, an ordinary family home, North Augusta, South Carolina. And I think what makes this case stick with people, what makes it so unsettling, is this idea, the suggestion that someone, a mother, a nurse, someone seemingly grounded, can just dissolve, vanish from a locked house without leaving any real trace.
Exactly. It's chilling. So we're going to walk through the events of September 20th, 2014. Tammy Kingery, she was 37, a nurse, mother of three. By all accounts, really devoted to her family, living this seemingly normal small-town life. But underneath, sources say there was this heavy internal burden. We're talking more than just being tired. It sounds like pretty significant depression, a lot of stress.
And that internal struggle, which we really need to unpack, seems to have just peaked. It culminated in this serious crisis that Saturday morning. The real sticking point, though, for the police, for online sleuths, for everyone who's looked at this, is that final scene. Tammy vanishes, but she leaves this handwritten note behind. And the note suggests something really temporary, really immediate. It just says, gone for a walk, be back soon.
Right. But then the details that just completely throw that off, the things that make this immediately suspicious, not just another missing person case, she left everything behind. Her keys, her phone, her purse, her ID, everything you'd need to function, basically. And then the biggest problem, the house was locked, secured from the outside.
That locked door. That is absolutely the heart of the ambiguity here. The note says one thing, casual, temporary, I'll be right back. But the logistics, leaving everything essential, the door being locked, it just argues so strongly against her leaving rationally, or willingly, or frankly alone. The evidence just flat out contradicts the story the note seems to tell.
So that's really what we need to explore today, looking at these sources. What actually happened in that very short time frame? Was this some kind of desperate, impulsive act, a tragic escape driven by this really intense internal distress? Or do we have to seriously consider that this was a staged scene, foul play maybe, designed to look like she just walked away? To understand any of it, we have to start with the context, the lead up to that morning. It sounds like she was under immense pressure.
Oh, absolutely. The context is critical here. You can't understand that morning without understanding the weeks before. She was a nurse, which we know is incredibly stressful work, add motherhood, the demands of family life, and there were reports of marital strain, too. It created this kind of pressure cooker environment. We're not just talking about feeling a bit burned out. Her psychological resources sound like they were genuinely depleted.
And it wasn't just emotional, was it? This pressure was showing up physically. The sources are pretty clear on that. In the weeks before she disappeared, she was having physical symptoms. Unexplained stuff. Night sweats, specifically.
Yes, night sweats, which can point to a few different things physiologically, but definitely indicates something was off. And just a general feeling of being unwell, physically run down.
That physical side is so important, and it's just tragically ironic, isn't it? She had actually made a doctor's appointment for the Sunday, the day after she went missing.
Exactly. And that tells us two crucial things. First, whatever was happening physically, it was bad enough that she knew she needed medical help. She recognized it. And second, she disappeared right at the very moment she was trying to get a handle on her health. It just highlights the severity of the crisis she must have been in. It suggests this wasn't just physical illness or emotional collapse, but maybe a really frightening combination of both.
That combination, that intersection of mind and body, it seems like it just hit a breaking point on the morning of September 20th. When she got to her nursing shift, 7 a.m., her behavior was apparently way off, not her usual self at all. Sources say she was immediately noticeably agitated, really uncharacteristically so.
Yeah, agitated might even be putting it mildly. It sounds like clear, acute distress. She apparently raised her voice at one point, which people noted was completely out of character for her. It suggests a loss of composure, maybe feeling overwhelmed. But the detail from work that really sends a chill down your spine is her focus on her own physical state, compulsively checking her
Even
stuff.
blood pressure readings.
Yeah, exactly. 4 times. She checked her own blood pressure 4 separate times in just a short period after arriving. And every time, it confirmed what she likely felt. It was high. Dangerously high. Now, when a nurse, someone trained to assess vitals, does that to themselves repeatedly, it tells you they believe they're in the middle of a medical emergency. Whether that emergency was primarily driven by anxiety or a physical problem or both, doesn't really matter. She felt she was in crisis. It's probably the clearest window we have into her state of mind right before she left work. She was overwhelmed.
You can almost picture it, can't you? A nurse, someone whose job is caring for others, frantically checking her own vitals, unable to calm down this physical storm inside her. And because of that distress, the high blood pressure confirmed, she just couldn't stay. She couldn't work her shift. She didn't even feel okay to drive herself home.
That's right. So her husband, Bart Kingery, he came to the hospital, picked her up around 8:30 that morning, left her car there, and when they got home, she apparently went straight upstairs, changed into pajamas, which, is pretty much the universal sign for I need to rest, I need to recover. She was clearly trying to de-escalate whatever was happening to her, hoping rest would stabilize things.
Okay, so this brings us right into that incredibly tight window, the critical time frame where she vanishes. Everything seems to happen between about 10 a.m. and maybe 10:30 a.m. We need to really focus on what happens right before she's discovered missing.
Yeah, the timeline is pretty well established, thankfully. Around 10 a.m., Park leaves the house. He takes their 2 sons with him to run some errands. And we know this part is solid because there's security camera footage from different stores they went to. It confirms his alibi for that specific, brief period. So Tammy was left alone in the house, in her pajamas, presumably trying to rest.
So she's alone for, what, maybe 15 minutes? Half an hour? Tops, that's it. And when Park Kingery gets back, somewhere between 10:15 and 10:30, the scene he finds is just immediately confusing.
Completely unexpected.
Yeah.
And illogical. First thing, the family dog, which had been inside, was now outside, which is odd. Then inside, sitting right there, are all her essentials. Her purse, her keys, her cell phone, her ID, everything should need to go anywhere. And of course, the front door was locked. The whole picture just completely contradicted the expectation. He expected to find his wife resting, maybe sleeping, not gone.
Let's zoom in on that note for a second. The note itself and how the family reacted to it, because this little piece of paper is telling a story, but the physical evidence, the scene, just screams something else entirely.
The note itself is very simple, almost too simple, maybe. It reads, "Went for a walk, be back soon, love you." Just reading it, it sounds so casual. Quick trip out, like maybe stepping out to get the mail or chat with a neighbor briefly. It suggests, every intention of returning very, very soon. Minutes, not hours. Definitely not forever.
But that massive contradiction you mentioned, the family apparently immediately said, no way, she wouldn't just go for a walk. Why? Why was that idea so unbelievable to them?
2 main reasons. The location and her condition at that moment. Their house wasn't in a neat little subdivision with sidewalks. It was in a more remote area. Surrounded by thick woods, roads nearby were apparently pretty high speed, definitely not designed for pedestrians. It just wasn't a walking-friendly place. And maybe more importantly, think about her state. She was wearing pajamas. Just an hour or so before, she was highly distressed, physically unwell, confirmed high blood pressure. Does it make any sense that someone in that condition would suddenly decide to take a brisk solo hike through the woods without even grabbing their phone? It's unlikely, highly unlikely.
And that brings us circling back again and again to the locked door. It's the linchpin, isn't it? If we try, just for a second, to take the note literally she left on her own for a walk. How did she lock the house? Her keys were inside, undeniably inside.
This is where we move from trying to understand her psychology to facing a real forensic puzzle. It's the one detail you just can't easily explain away if you believe she left voluntarily and alone. Think about house locks, especially back in 2014. Most homes had deadbolts, right? And you almost always need a key to lock a deadbolt from the outside. Now, if her keys are sitting on the counter inside, how does that door get locked from the outside? Maybe if it was just a spring latch knob that auto-locked when pulled shut. But even those usually have a little button or turn thing on the inside you have to set first. It's not impossible, but it's much less common for a main entry door than a deadbolt.
So if it was a deadbolt, which seems more standard, the only way it gets locked from the outside is if someone else locked it. Someone with another key.
Yeah.
Or maybe someone locked it after she was already gone, staging the scene, using a tool, or maybe locking it before she actually left somehow.
Precisely. If we assume a standard deadbolt was involved, this detail almost forces you to consider external involvement. Someone else was there. It's the biggest red flag. It's what shifts the whole narrative towards foul play, or at least towards a scene that was deliberately manipulated. If she left voluntarily, rationally, why lock the door without keys? It should have been unlocked. The fact that it was locked strongly suggests someone was trying to control the narrative. Staging.
Okay, so when Park finds this scene, realizes Tammy's gone, the note, the locked door, the alarm bells must have gone off immediately, especially given her state that morning. Search efforts started pretty quickly, didn't they? What did those initial searches turn up?
They were extensive, yeah. Police got involved right away. Lots of volunteers came out. They brought in canine units, multiple teams. They covered the property, the thick woods surrounding the house, nearby roads. A really thorough initial sweep, but the results were just bafflingly negative. No signs of a struggle inside the house, no forced entry, no blood, no disturbed furniture, and nothing outside either. No footprints leading off into the woods in an obvious way, no discarded items, no indication of an abduction happening right there on the property, just nothing.
But the canine units, the scent dogs, they did pick up something, didn't they? It provided a direction, at least initially.
They did, and this is a really critical but also frustrating piece of information. The dogs definitely got a strong scent. They followed it away from the house. But here's the key detail. Multiple dogs, multiple handlers, they all followed the trail to roughly the same spot, the edge of the property line, specifically near the end of the driveway where it meets the road.
Yeah.
And then the scent just stopped cold.
Stopped cold at the driveway. Okay. What does that usually mean in a canine track?
Standard interpretation. The person got into a vehicle. The scent trail ends abruptly because the person is no longer on foot, no longer leaving scent on the ground. They're inside a car, truck, maybe even a motorcycle.
So the forensic implication there is huge. If Tammy left on foot, she didn't wander off into the woods like the gone for a walk note implies. She walked maybe 50 feet just to the end of her own driveway and then got into something, a vehicle, almost immediately.
That is absolutely the strongest deduction from the canine evidence. It really pushes back hard against the idea of her wandering off alone in distress. It lends significant weight to the theory that she was picked up, either willingly, by someone she knew who was waiting, or possibly coerced, forced into a vehicle. But either way, the dogs point towards a car being involved, right at the edge of her property.
We should probably also touch on that confusing tangent during the search. The false lead with one of the dogs, right? The shack.
Ah, yes. That detail comes up a lot in online discussions. It adds to the sense of frustration and kind of wasted effort in those early days. One of the canines did follow a really strong scent, seemingly independent of the others, deep into the woods. It led the searchers to an old abandoned shack some distance away. And for a moment, hopes were probably high. Was this where she went? Was she inside? But no. Upon investigation, the source of the strong scent was confirmed to be the remains of a deceased animal, a dog, inside the shack. Completely unrelated to Tammy. It was just a really unfortunate, disheartening dead end. Probably caused by the concentrated biological scent confusing the dog. Wasted precious time and resources when the clock was ticking.
Okay, so let's try to pull together that initial investigation phase. We've got no signs of struggle inside, a note saying, back soon, all her essential items left behind, canine evidence strongly pointing to her getting into a vehicle at the end of the driveway, and this massive question mark over how the door got locked from the outside without her keys. Investigators were basically left juggling three possibilities, right? And none of them seemed to fit all the facts perfectly.
It's a textbook example of conflicting evidence, a perfect storm, really. The physical scene, the locked door, the canine trails pushes you towards thinking about external factors, staging, maybe foul play. But then her known psychological state, the extreme stress, the high blood pressure, the agitation that morning, pushes you just as strongly towards thinking about an impulsive act, something driven by a medical or mental health crisis. And the theories that have kind of bubbled up over the last decade are all attempts to try and force these contradictory puzzle pieces into some kind of coherent picture.
Right. Let's spend some time unpacking those theories. The ones that circulate online, the ones people keep coming back to, trying to make sense of this. We should probably start with the least sinister one, but maybe, given the evidence, the least likely. Voluntary disappearance.
Theory 1. Voluntary disappearance. The escape. Okay, so the argument for this rests heavily on her emotional state. We know she was stressed. We know she was dealing with depression, burnout from work, those reported marital issues. So the idea is maybe she just hit a wall, snapped, and impulsively decided, That's it. I'm leaving. I'm abandoning this life.
And maybe the note in that context could be seen as what? A quick, maybe not fully thought out attempt to soften the blow, or buy herself some time, a message for the kids, maybe.
You could try to frame it that way, perhaps, a gesture or something. But the huge counter argument, the thing that makes a planned escape seem so improbable, is the total lack of preparation. Think about it. If you're making a conscious decision to start a new life, even spur of the moment, you take essentials. You take your ID, you take money, your wallet, your phone for contact. Leaving literally all of that behind argues very, very strongly against any kind of rational planned escape. Where was she going? How would she survive?
So, for this theory to hold any water, you'd have to imagine her distress was so extreme, so overwhelming, that all logic just went out the window. And she relied entirely on someone else picking her up immediately, like walked straight out the door, maybe made a quick call before leaving, or just walked to the driveway knowing someone would be there. Someone who would provide everything she needed from that point on. And who also somehow managed to lock the door behind her.
That's pretty much the only way to make voluntary disappearance fit the canine evidence and the locked door. An immediate rendezvous with an accomplice. An accomplice who had a car waiting, had resources for her, and crucially, had a key to the house or some way to lock it after she left. But even then, why write? Gone for a walk. If the plan was a clean break with help, that node seems misleading, unnecessarily confusing. Why not just leave?
Okay, let's move to the theory that dominates a lot of the online true crime forums. Theory 2, foul play. And this one seems almost entirely anchored to that one piece of physical evidence, the locked door.
Yeah, foul play gets a lot of traction precisely because of those suspicious circumstances. The locked door just screams staging to many people.
Yeah.
As we discussed, if someone else locked that door, they were either trying to cover up something bad that happened inside, or maybe they were helping her leave secretly. But either way, it implies the scene wasn't what it appeared to be. It was manipulated to look like she just casually walked out.
And naturally, speculation often turns towards those closest to the missing person. Given the reports of marital strain, Park Kingery often comes up in these discussions. Now, his alibi, the store security footage during that critical 15-30-minute window when she likely vanished, that seems pretty solid. But people argue maybe the note was written earlier under duress. Or maybe the event itself happened slightly before he left or immediately upon his return outside that narrow alibi window.
It's true, you have to be really careful with alibis. That window is incredibly narrow. It would make staging a complex crime very difficult, very risky in that short time. But impossible, maybe not. But if you set aside the husband for a moment, the focus shifts. Who else could have been involved? Who was waiting at the end of the driveway? An unknown acquaintance. Someone she met.
And that brings us to that one really intriguing but ultimately frustratingly unconfirmed piece of information, the potential sighting by her daughter.
Ah, yes. The motorcycle sighting. Her daughter apparently told investigators she thought she saw her mom, Tammy, riding as a passenger on a motorcycle near their home, shortly after she supposedly left. Now, if that sighting is accurate, it's huge. It implies she was picked up, potentially by someone she knew, maybe willingly, maybe not, and a motorcycle. That would perfectly explain why the canine scent trails stop so abruptly at the road. Motorcycles don't leave the same kind of lingering ground scent for dogs as a car might.
But the key word is if. They could never corroborate that sighting, could they? No one else saw it. No other evidence supported it.
Exactly. It remains this tantalizing but ultimately unproven possibility. If it's the canine evidence, it suggests a vehicle's involved, but who was driving? And was Tammy there willingly? It just leaves us hanging. This theory requires you to believe the note was a lie, part of a deliberate deception, possibly criminal. And whoever was responsible was either incredibly careful in staging the scene, locking the door, getting her away quickly in a vehicle, or they knew Tammy very well, knew her routines, knew about her distress.
Okay, so that leaves the third major possibility. Theory 3. Mental health crisis leading to an impulsive act. This one really tries to connect her known state of mind that morning with the seemingly illogical things she did.
And there's a strong basis for it, you have to admit. We know about the severe agitation at work, the documented high blood pressure, the history of stress, depression, the physical symptoms like night sweats. It paints a pretty clear picture of someone potentially experiencing an acute medical or psychological emergency. The pressure had been building, and maybe it just broke that morning.
So in this light, the note, "went for a walk," isn't read literally. It's seen as symptomatic.
Exactly. It could signify a flight response, not a planned walk, but an impulsive need to escape the overwhelming feelings, the pressure inside her own head and body. Logic, safety, planning. Those things might go out the window in such a state. Walking away in pajamas, leaving her phone, her ID that's actually highly consistent with certain types of psychological breaks, like a dissociative episode or even a brief psychotic break where reality feels distorted. She might have been fleeing the feeling that perceived threat inside, not necessarily making a rational decision to leave her life.
Okay, I can see how her actions fit that profile, but we still run smack into the logistical problems, don't we? The locked door, the canine evidence pointing to a car. How does someone in the middle of a severe mental health crisis manage to write a somewhat coherent note, somehow lock the door behind them without keys, and then just happen to walk directly to a waiting vehicle at the end of the driveway? That feels like a stretch.
It is the major challenge to this theory, absolutely. But maybe not insurmountable. Could she have written the note in a fleeting moment of clarity just before leaving? Possible. The locked door.
Hmm.
That's the toughest part. Unless, as we speculated, it was a very specific type of lock that could self-latch. Or maybe it wasn't actually deadbolted. Or maybe Park's memory of finding it locked was mistaken in the initial panic. Unlikely, but possible. As for the car, maybe in her distress, she did manage to call someone, a friend, family member, using a neighbor's phone maybe, or a burner phone we don't know about, and they came to get her right away, finding her near the road.
It requires a few maybes to line up. And the police seem to move away from the idea she just wandered off into the woods in distress, right? Based on the lack of findings there.
They did. They spent a lot of time searching those woods, thinking about suicide or accidental death due to exposure or disorientation, but found nothing. And the canine trails really contradict that scenario. The dogs put the key event, getting into a vehicle, right at the driveway, not deep in the woods. So even if a mental health crisis triggered her departure, that crisis seems to have very quickly led her into a vehicle, which means either someone took advantage of her vulnerable state or she was picked up by someone who knew she was in distress.
It really is a case where the evidence seems to pull in opposite directions. It almost cancels itself out. The note says voluntary walk. The locked door says staging foul play. The canines say vehicle pickup. Her mental state says crisis incapacitation. How do you square all that?
You can't, really. Not definitively. And that's precisely why this case creates such a powerful, enduring sense of mystery. It has this cultural resonance. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Why does Tammy Kingery's disappearance, happening in this quiet, ordinary setting, stick with so many people? Why is it still discussed so much online?
I think it taps into a really primal fear. The fear about safety in the one place you're supposed to be safe. Your home. It evokes that feeling people call the eerie normalcy of unsolved disappearances. Like the monster isn't hiding in the shadows, it's right there in the everyday routine.
Exactly. The truly haunting idea is that someone can just evaporate from their own locked house during the most mundane moment, gone for a walk.
Yeah.
That fragility of the everyday, the routine. That's something everyone can relate to on some level. We depend on the predictability of our lives, the security of our homes. And a case like this suggests that security can be an illusion, that a locked door and a simple note can mask something utterly inexplicable and terrifying. It's deeply unsettling.
And that ambiguity, the fact that you can argue multiple theories and none of them quite fit perfectly, that fuels the online communities, doesn't it? When the official investigation hits a wall because the evidence is so contradictory, places like Reddit, the forums, the podcasts, they become the ongoing investigation. People trying to solve the puzzle the police couldn't crack.
Absolutely. And in Tammy's case, the ambiguity is the story, the known facts about her health, her stress. They strongly point towards an involuntary, crisis-driven departure. But the scene, the locked door, the canine evidence, suggesting a vehicle points just as strongly towards planning, orchestration, maybe something sinister. Those two narratives just refuse to coexist peacefully. And it's that unresolved tension, that fundamental conflict in the evidence that keeps people searching for answers, even a decade later.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this a bit as we move towards wrapping up. Looking at all the conflicting evidence, all the theories, what's the core analytical struggle here? What makes this case so hard to pin down?
For me, the central struggle is to navigate that incredibly fine, dark line. The line between a self-imposed vanishing triggered by a genuine, severe mental health crisis and a scenario involving calculated foul play, a staged scene. You're basically forced to decide which piece of evidence is lying to you. Is it the note, or is it the locked door? Because they can't both be straightforwardly true in the context of her leaving alone.
Right. If you believe the door was locked by someone else, you're pushed into thinking about abduction, maybe even homicide. The note becomes a lie, a deliberate piece of misdirection.
Yes. And if you go down that road, the foul play road, you then have to figure out the logistics. Who did it? Why right then? Why stage it in that specific, slightly flawed way? The daughter's unconfirmed motorcycle sighting is the only tiny thread that points to a possible external player. But without proof, it's just speculation. The canine evidence, though, definitely supports the vehicle part of that theory. A getaway vehicle.
Okay, but conversely, what if you decide the locked door is the red herring? Maybe it was a weird lock that self-latched, or maybe Park misremembered in the shock of the moment? If you dismiss the door, then you have to fully lean into the psychological angle.
And that psychological angle is probably the most factually grounded part of the story.
Yeah.
We know she was under immense pressure. We have evidence of it. We have to consider that burden she was carrying, suppressing distress, the weight of being a caregiver both at work and at home, and the physical toll it was taking. High blood pressure, night sweats. Her body was screaming for help. Looking at it that way, the case becomes less of a mystery and more of a profound tragedy. A tragedy rooted in maybe not getting the right mental or physical health support at a really critical moment.
Her leaving suddenly, it takes on a different meaning then, doesn't it? Maybe more tragic. She wasn't necessarily running away from her life or responsibilities. Maybe she was trying to run from the illness, the overwhelming feeling itself.
And that scheduled doctor's appointment for the next day just hangs over everything. It's heartbreaking. She knew something was wrong. She was taking steps to get help. And then she vanished right before she could get that help. It strongly suggests the crisis just completely overtook her rational mind, her ability to stay safe or follow through on her plan.
It's just baffling because whichever theory you lean toward, mental health crisis or staged foul play, the end result is the same. A complete erasure. She leaves her phone, cuts off the digital trail. She gets into a vehicle almost immediately, cuts off the physical trail. It's just clean, too quiet.
And that silence, that lack of any concrete follow-up evidence is what makes it resonate. It's what tortures her family, who are left without answers, without closure. Her story hits home because it reminds us, I think, that our lives, no matter how secure they seem, the routines, the locks on the doors, the people around us, can be incredibly fragile.
That fragility of routine, yeah. That idea that someone can just dissolve, vanish from inside the secure bubble, leaving behind just one tiny contradictory clue, a note saying, "Be back soon." It's like an unfinished sentence, isn't it? The unsettling quiet after someone stops talking mid-thought.
It really is. Tammy Kingery's case is this stark reminder that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't grand conspiracies. They're found in the small, quiet details. In the space between a locked front door and a simple note left on a kitchen counter. The answer, the key to the whole puzzle, feels like it's locked inside that house with her memory. Metaphorically, maybe literally.
So Tammy Kingery's case remains cold. It's centered so heavily on the internal state of a person under immense pressure, yet complicated by these external physical facts that just don't line up. It really embodies that struggle between the ordinary day she probably expected to have resting at home and the utterly inexplicable outcome that just shattered her family's world. It's a reminder that sometimes the truth vanishes along with the person.
Exactly. And until that locked door is somehow explained either through new evidence about her state of mind or maybe someday the identity of whoever might have helped or harmed her, that ambiguity is just going to continue. It'll keep haunting North Augusta, and it will keep fueling those online discussions for years to come, I imagine.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we revisit the baffling case of Brian Schaffer, the medical student who walked into a bar and never walked out. Was it a perfect disappearance or something far darker?